Hey everyone, happy Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Kristin McMaster, and I am joining you all from the central coast of California in a very small town called Cayucas. This is the unceded territory of the Chumash, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I thought I would start our talk today telling you a little bit about myself and how I found my way to First Descents. I'm an oncology social worker and have been for about 15 years now. I joined First Descents about 4.5 years ago, going on 5 years now, and I'm their mental health resource specialist. And FD historically has always been amazing at looking at all of our participants' medical needs and making sure that we know enough about them to support them out on programs. And more recently, when I came on board, we've incorporated a lot of questions around mental health. And we've done that in an effort to make sure that we're supporting our participants, not only from a medical standpoint, but also from a mental health standpoint, just recognizing the importance of emotional safety and well-being at our programs. So I have many different roles at FD, but one of them is working with our participants before they go out on programs to make sure that they're prepared and that we're supporting them as best they can when they show up there. I found my way to FD when I was doing oncology social work at UC Irvine Medical Center. I was also working in an outpatient clinic with young adults who had other chronic illnesses, but my primary focus was oncology at that time. And this was, over 10 years ago. I was asked to go volunteer at a program in Montana. And I jumped on the opportunity because I love adventure and went out to Montana on a kayaking program. And I was just completely blown away by the impact of the program and what I saw happening out there in Montana. It dawned on me that for a lot of my patients who I was working with in the hospital, many of them were really not able to process the emotional impact of their cancer experience while going through treatment. And we describe that period of time as what can kind of present as survival mode. And that's the mental state that people can stay in while they're in treatment because they're just focused on surviving. And it seemed to me, going out on that program, that a lot of my patients were processing the emotional impact of their cancer after they completed treatment. And unfortunately, the way the hospital was set up, that was a period of time when we kind of sent our patients off and wished them well and sent them back out into the world with this expectation, well, treatment's over, so they should be okay. And when I went on that program, I really woke up to the fact that a lot of the aftermath, the emotional aftermath of cancer was hitting them post-treatment, and they were processing it for the first time out at the program. And so it really left an imprint on my heart and in my mind and the work that I was doing. And I never forgot that experience of being out in Montana and seeing what these adventure programs can do for young adults who've gone through a life-altering illness like cancer or MS. And one of the things I want to share, it's a tradition we have at FD, but it also kind of leads to the conversation I want to have today with you all. But we have this tradition of nicknames at FD, and my nickname I chose for myself on that program was Turtle. And I was inspired to choose that nickname by a woman by the name of Rel Sun, who was one of the first female big wave surfers who surfed pipeline and all over the world competitively. And she was diagnosed with breast cancer at the peak of her career. And she was also one of the first young women to speak openly and publicly about the experience of having breast cancer as a young adult woman. And Rel, she surfed through her treatment, through her chemo. And I watched a documentary about her, and she talked about the experience of being held under the water and how that can be a time when you feel really out of control of yourself and your body, and you can feel unsafe. And Rel used to talk about how what she would do while she was being held under the water is she would look at the sea turtles and she would tell herself, I'm here just visiting my ancestors and they're keeping me safe underwater. And I just loved that because I just thought it was beautiful the way she was able to reframe an experience that would, for a lot of us, be really anxiety provoking and really scary. And she turned it into this really beautiful experience just by calling on the sea turtles that she was swimming with and recognizing them as beings that were watching over her. And I loved that. So I have chosen the name Turtle from the time I volunteered to now. Somebody else took that nickname. And so I have shifted over to Tortuga and go by Tugs for short. And the wonderful thing about nicknames within the FD community is it really allows for us to kind of separate from our other life in some way and also kind of start a new identity for ourselves. And this is a tradition that we carry onto our programs. So when people show up at our programs, we encourage them to think of nicknames for themselves. And it can be inspired by many different things, but it's one of the ways in which we start to create this container at our programs for folks to separate from life back home to kind of start over and reset. And the talk I want to share with you all today, I'm so passionate about right now. I've been doing a lot of reading and learning about trauma and the impact of trauma and how many misconceptions there are about what that word really means. And I think for a lot of us, we assume that trauma is something that happens kind of in a moment, or like an accident or a fire or something that just is, we kind of limit our idea of trauma to very severe incidents. But trauma can show up in so many different ways. And there's a definition I love of trauma that talks about, how it can encompass any experience we have when we feel threatened or unsafe, or like our emotional or physical well-being is at risk in some way. And trauma can be acute, meaning that it happens really quickly, or it can be chronic, meaning that it happens over a longer period of time. And I think for all of our participants, we work with many different populations now. While we started in oncology, we've grown as an organization, and we now also serve young adults with MS. We serve healthcare workers. We serve caregivers of those who have MS and cancer. And I like to come with the assumption that every single one of our participants, maybe without a label of having, post-traumatic stress disorder or, being traumatized, but has experienced some kind of trauma. And so that's the lens in which I kind of view our programs and how we support our participants, that we should assume that they all come to us with some kind of trauma experience, whether it be, questioning your own mortality as a young adult at a time when you should be thriving and being independent, and your body should be at its peak, and having a diagnosis like cancer and what that does to you, whether it's having MS and not knowing how your body is going to change year to year, what might show up with your symptoms, when they might show up, or how they might present. Grappling with that kind of uncertainty can feel like a type of chronic trauma. And for our healthcare workers, who have served on the front lines and those who've been there before, there are plenty of traumatic experiences that they pay witness to over time that can take a toll on our physical and mental health. And so our programs, what I love about them is we start from the very beginning. So when our participants first connect with us, we create a very strong relationship of trust with them. And it starts with our programs team at our headquarters, who work with our participants before they go out on a program to make sure we understand where they're at medically, where they're at emotionally. We make sure we relay that to our lead staff who are out in the field, so they have a good idea of how to best support this person. So that trust building starts from the moment that their inquiry gets to us and the moment that communication starts to happen. And then when our participants go out on a program, when we've experienced trauma and how a lot of people can show up at our programs, they're a little bit detached from their bodies. And a lot of our participants describe themselves as kind of feeling like they're just going through the motions, and like they feel a real disconnect, like their bodies have become strangers to them. They don't know if they can trust their bodies. They're not really feeling like they're in their bodies fully. So there's a pretty big disconnect upon arrival there. And so what FD does so beautifully is we create this container at our programs. And as I mentioned, it can start with the nicknames. We bring a lot of silliness and laughter to our programs, and we do that with intent, because that silliness and laughter triggers the emotion of joy, which then can trigger people to reopening up to a community and that felt sense of like, oh yeah, I remember what it feels like to want to connect with other people and to have that feeling of shared joy with them. So there's a lightness at our programs that I think really helps people open up to the space. And then when you bring people together who have a shared experience that is so hard to understand unless you've really been through it, when you bring those folks together, it's like the connection happens just so organically and instantaneously. It's just the most beautiful thing to watch. And I think for a lot of our participants, we get a lot of folks who come to us with social anxiety. They get nervous in groups of people, but I've never been at a program where that just didn't dissipate almost instantly because there's a shared experience of cancer or MS or taking care of a loved one who has those illnesses or being on the front lines and understanding what it means to hold space for people as they go through their own trauma. And that shared experience is so powerful that it just connects our participants almost instantaneously, and it creates a sense of community out the gate that carries them through the experience of the program. Another thing that we do, which I love because it's a tangible way of showing that we care and we want to nurture our participants, and that's bringing out chefs who cook amazing, nutritious food for them. And there's something really special about caring for people in that way and showing them in this physical way, we are here to support you and nurture you and take care of you. And on top of that, the community aspect really builds because we share all of our meals together. And for some folks who might be single or who live alone, it may have been a long time since they shared meals with people regularly like that. And I think there's so much bonding that happens organically at the dinner table or when we're eating breakfast or when we're having picnics out on the river or out on the rock. And so that food is really a center point for our programs, and it's a way for us to show our participants that we are there for them and there to take care of them. So then we get to the activity portion, right? So we've created this sense of community, this safe space that has some laughter, it has some joy. There's maybe some heavy conversations that are happening and that need to happen. And we take our participants who have been in a situation where they felt out of control of their bodies, out of control of the situation, which for all of us can provoke a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. And so after having created this container and the safe space for them, we take them out on these adventurous activities that most of them have never done before. And they get out there, and I think what I've seen happen, what I've witnessed happen, is it kind of triggers that same fear that they had when they were going through their illness or whatever their experience was. But they're in a new environment where the logical part of their brain can check in if they are present in that moment and recognize that that fear stimulus is really from the past. And in this present moment, they're very safe. And what that does is it allows them to figure out a new way to cope with that fear, with that, feeling of being out of control and the unknown and not knowing what's coming. And we take them into these activities where they will fail. There will be failure. And we will teach them and we will support them in getting back up. And that is part of the healing process that happens at our programs. We challenge them at their own choice and at their own pace, and we support them through that challenge. And what I watch people come back into their bodies. I watch them come back into the present moment and be able to separate from that old feeling of panic that they've carried around with them for so long. And having people in it with you who have maybe had their bodies compromised in some way by illness, and watching them all learn with you creates this unique feeling of empowerment. It's just a different than for our participants who've gone back to their yoga classes or rock climbing gyms, and they're surrounded by people who haven't had this life-altering change. And that can feel very alienating. And at our programs, they're all in it together. And there's just something different about that that allows them to embrace the experience and the challenge of the activities in a very unique way. And it's just one of my favorite things to see is when we show up at a program and participants get a little taste of what they're going to do, and they see a climb that we're talking about doing towards the end of the week, or they look at rapids that we talk about going down, or they watch other surfers out in the water and they think, no way I'm going to get there. And then sure enough, by the end of the week, they're all doing it. And it's just so amazing to be able to watch people discover what they're still capable of, even in their new bodies. And so I would say, these programs, there is a magical recipe, and I don't want to give away all of our secrets, so I'm not telling you everything, but there's so much that's poured into them, and it happens in such a beautifully organic way, and it really transforms people. And I've seen that as a mental health professional. I go out as a volunteer, and we do that with intent. We don't have mental health professionals at our program because we want the support to happen within the peer community. But I've gone out as a volunteer, and I have watched over and over again our participants come back to life. And one of my dearest friends and another participant said the same exact thing after going on our program. One of my dear friends who had leukemia was in treatment for 2 years. He went out with us on a surfing program, and he called me right after and he said, Kristin, like, the doctors may have saved my life, but FD taught me how to live again. And those exact words came from another participant and are on our website. And that is what I see. I see people coming back to life. And it's just a remarkable experience. And I hope for, the future of young adults who have experienced illness, that all of you get to go out on an FD program someday, because they really are life-changing. And, I have studied oncology, I've studied illness and the impact of illness and all the psychosocial aftermath of those things. And I do therapy and I do counseling with people, but I can never offer what another person who's been through it can. And what we've realized in research that we've done is the lasting impact is really the felt sense of community. That's what sticks with our participants when they leave. And that's the support they go home with. They go home with a new community, and they've learned that they can lean on that community if and when life gets hard again for them, because for many it does. For many, the cancer journey doesn't end, because there's always doctor's visits to go to and scans to have. And with MS, it's a lifelong illness that they have to learn to grapple with and navigate the uncertainty of that. And we send them home with a new felt sense of community that they can draw upon when times get tough. And so I continue to be inspired by our programs. I love going out on them. I love working with our participants and helping to set them up for success when they go out, and making them feel heard and supported. And I'm so grateful for this organization, for not only having me on board, but just for the work that we do. And the people who are involved in FD are just some of the most remarkable and amazing people I've ever met. So I hope any of you who are listening to this, I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you do something kind for yourself in honor of this month. Find something that brings you joy. We at FD, we're all about the outdoors. And I think part of the reason why is because being outdoors and being in nature really brings you back to the present moment. And just being in the present moment can be really healing in and of itself. And nature, for many different reasons, makes that much easier. When we can hear the sounds of the birds or the river, or we see the mountains or hear the ocean, it brings us back inside of ourselves and into this present moment. And so that is certainly at the core of why our FD programs work the way they do. We go into beautiful spaces with beautiful people, and we support them through a very challenging experience. And it's, in my opinion, unrivaled in terms of the impact that it offers. So I'm going to leave you with one quote from a participant, which I love, and I think kind of sums this up really beautifully. This participant who went out on our program was on one of our kayaking programs, and they said, I can still hear my guide saying, the river is a metaphor for life. You will face challenges, but you can control the bottom. So slow down and take control. So with that, I will wish you all farewell and thank you so much if you made it through the 20 minutes of me talking. I am not a video blogger, so this is very new territory for me, but hopefully, some part of this resonated with you. And if you haven't been on an FD program, I really hope that we see you out there someday. Take care.